Hello, welcome once again to the Marijuana Resolve Show here at BC TV Studios in downtown Brattleboro. I'd like to just begin today by mentioning that Daryl, our co-host, is out sick, and I know that I do, and Jeanette, who is our guest today, and hopefully most of you out there in Brattleboro will wish him speedy recovery. I've been stopped on the street and asked why. I have lesions on my face, and basically I had a diabetic seizure, and I fell on my face, which I understand is the better way to fall down when you pass out. So I hope, and I'm sure they'll clear up soon enough, although as you know, diabetics heal a little slower. Today we have as our guest Jeanette White. But before I bring her on, I really would just like to say to you that, as usual, we have so much that we need to get done in this program and other parts of the things that we do in Marijuana Resolve. And I would like to point out that Joe Bushy, our producer, is absolutely indispensable and always amazing in the things that he comes up with. Paul Bennett, our treasurer, is one of the people who has really helped us from the beginning, and I just wanted to mention those and thank both Joe and Paul. Welcome, Senator White. I'm glad to see you again.
Thank you.
And we, as many of our viewers know, since we talk about marijuana in different ways, today we're going to discuss what's happening in the Senate and basically in the Assembly concerning decriminalization and medical marijuana. So basically, I'd like to start let's start with a current status. If you could tell our audience what that is.
Well, the current status of the decriminalization bills, I have to tell you that in the Senate, the bill hasn't gone anyplace. I don't know if you know this or not, but I think it's now maybe 4 years ago I had a decriminalization bill, and I was not on the Judiciary Committee at the time, and the Judiciary Committee was very opposed to this bill, but I got them to hold one hearing, and after they held their one hearing, they had wonderful testimony from people, and they held the hearing, and they passed it. They passed a bill that would have, it was not the bill that I would have passed, and it wasn't the bill that I introduced, but it was a step in the right direction. And the Senate passed it. The House did not take it up.
I see.
So this year, we've introduced bills again on the House and the Senate side, and the Senate's thought on the Judiciary Committee, which I serve on now, but the thought there is that we're not going to take it up again and be dunked by the House by them not taking it up, because we put ourselves out there on the line, and then the House refuses to take it up. So it's being left to this year to take up in the House first. I have no idea where it's going in the House. My guess is it won't go anyplace. In order to get bills passed this year, we have to have them, if they originate in the House, we have what's called crossover. They have to cross over to the Senate by the Friday after town meeting week. So it's only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, it's this week, and then the town meeting week, and then the next week. So it's 3 weeks. That means that all bills have to do that. If they originate in the Senate, they have to pass over to the House by then. So I don't see that we're going to have one this year.
You wouldn't know, and you may not know this, but because it's the House, but is there any particular holdup in the House? I have heard that the Speaker of the House will not kind of release it, if that's the right term.
Well, he isn't holding it or anything. It is in the Judiciary Committee. But if you don't have the support of the Speaker on something, you better have everybody else marching right behind you and willing to take on the Speaker. So, I don't think he's there.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, I think that's probably where it is.
Well, there are about roughly that we can estimate 60,000 or more. In some ways, I think we try to estimate that maybe as many as 100,000 people in the state of Vermont who, who have reported usage of marijuana. Maybe we could get them together sometime and see if we can get our speaker to take a second look at this issue.
Well, I think that the ultimate answer is not decriminalizing, but the ultimate answer is actually legalizing, and it would be better if it was done on a federal level. And there's a lot of law enforcement people who are not opposed to that, because if it was legal, you could control it, tax it, as we do with cigarettes and alcohol, make it harder for kids under 18 to get, because I have no problem with trying to keep kids from smoking it before they're 18. I think that that's as the same with cigarettes and alcohol. Anything that I wouldn't give them pharmaceuticals of any kind.
I wouldn't give them aspirin unless it was necessary.
Right. So I think that, and law enforcement is not opposed to this because it would have more control over it. And the biggest issue with law enforcement, or a number of the people that I've talked to legalizing, is that there's no way of testing for impairment, and that's a problem when you're driving. How do you test if somebody is under the influence when they're driving? And there are answers to that, and my understanding is that Philip Morris is working on that because they know it's coming.
That's interesting. In fact, we can stay with legalization a little bit longer, because the truth is, I think from our dealing with the public here in this state over the past, since April of 2010, we found that when you bring up the issue of decriminalization, many people's first reply is, decriminalization, why not just legalize it?
Right.
And I agree 100%. Now, for our listeners, I really should point out that legalization, as you were alluding to, is not a method to just turn it over freely, without any regulation. The real thing is that most of us prefer the alcohol model, where it's regulated like alcohol and tobacco,
and taxed,
right. And as you said, you give the mechanism much greater support to protect young folks from getting it.
Right.
Because in a store where an adult would go in, right behind them is a license to sell marijuana with a lucrative, large adult market. They're not going to be selling to children.
No, I know.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
And so legalization, which is either along the alcohol model or some consumer type law for adult consumption, is really what we need.
Right.
Now, this is the interesting thing, and the reason why I kind of want to stay with this for a few moments is that there are certain states that are moving in the direction of trying to legalize. So what we know is happening on the state level is there's a certain progression going on there. We also know that the federal government came to a solid wall because of Obama. And I don't know whether it's because he's running for re-election again, and then he'll lighten up if he gets a second term with this marijuana business, but he's really just turned the tables and has become very hard-nosed about marijuana.
Well, I can tell you that if California were to legalize it, for example, the way they legalized medical marijuana, that was a sham. When they do things by referendum and voter initiative, they're not well thought out. They're not. There's not a lot of detail. If you're going to do something like that, when we did our dispensary bill, when California legalized dispensaries, that's all they did. They had no controls over it. When we legalized dispensaries in Vermont, our bill was something like 70 or 80 pages long.
Okay.
So if the move is to legalize it the way they did in California without any kind of controls or anything, then I think that I would oppose it also. So I don't, there are ways of doing it and ways not to do it.
You know what's funny? The alcohol model, which is referenced frequently, is a very good model for
Well,
marijuana.
it is, but,
And
California referendums don't ever take into account details.
I bet
So
Massachusetts would do a good job on the referendum, I think.
I don't know if they have referendums in Massachusetts.
They do, yes.
They do?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, they have a legalization referendum growing there.
They do?
I don't know I don't have the details of it, but I do know that they have referendums and that they are targeting I keep saying legalization. I hate that word. I wish there was a better word. Legalization is an inflammatory term.
Right.
But in any case, I think we should go that way. And the interesting thing is that states who are interested in doing a legalization model should build into it provisions that the state can use. How do we deal with the federal government? Instead of waiting for the federal government, which is much less likely, the states ought to set up within their own state, this is what our intentions, and this is how we will deal with the federal government in order to achieve this type of a process. And until states do that, if they're just going to blindly legalize, they will not succeed.
Right.
They have to build in how are we going to deal with, work with, or even oppose the federal government.
Right.
We don't see that happening that much in this country. So then, you know what? Let's go to then the dispensary issues.
Sure.
What's been happening? You have a very keen sense about that. Can you give us an idea? For instance, one of the questions that a lot of people ask Joe and me and Daryl and others. Why are there only 1,000 patients as a maximum, considering that if you have up to 100,000 people in Vermont using marijuana, that's one thing, but you surely have more than 1,000 people of those 100,000 people who would be interested in using it for medical marijuana or have the conditions that are outlined.
I think that we, first of all, I have to say that it's the Department of Public Safety, which is they oversee the Vermont Emergency Management and the state police and everybody, and they're the ones that have the registry. They're the ones who our patients register. They hold it, and they have done such a great job with that registry, and they are overseeing the dispensaries, and they have done a great job with this. We allowed them to promulgate rules, because when you write legislation, you can't write every detail. It's just impossible to write every detail.
Right, I would think so,
So
yes.
then you allow the department that's going to administer it to write the rules around it and go into the detail. And they spent a lot of time. There's a particular guy in the department that, well, first of all, the Commissioner Flynn, is very supportive of it. He was supportive of it when we passed it. And one of the people in the department who, interestingly enough, used to be a cop in Bellows Falls, his name is Paco Amand, and he has been very, very supportive, and he's been helped writing the rules. And he's been in touch with me every step of the way. And as people said they were interested in opening dispensaries, he's talked to them, he's taken their comments into consideration. They now have their rules. They've brought them to the, there's a group called the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, and what happens is that they have to bring the rules to that committee, and that committee then looks at it and says, does this meet legislative intent or not? And if it does, then they can accept the rules. If it doesn't, then they have to go back and rework the rules. And I think that it's pretty clear that their rules meet the legislative intent. Now, for why 1,000? We felt that it was really important to go slow. Everything we saw in every state that just opened it up, California, Montana, Montana just went nuts. They put no restrictions on how many dispensaries or how many patients. And their regulations were pretty minimal. So we decided that it was better to have a smaller number that was pretty controlled and very successful to be able to show that we could do it and we could do it responsibly, and it would not. There's a lot of fear out there that when you open one, the crime rates are going to go way up near where you open a dispensary. Well, we happen to think that that isn't true, and a lot of our law enforcement thinks that isn't true.
Right.
So if we could do it in a controlled growth way, much like controlling development in your town, you don't want 43 people to come in and build big superbox stores all around your town. So that was the thought here. And we, at the time we passed it, there were about 300 registered patients, 320, something like that. So we thought that 1,000 would mean 300 or a tripling of the number. And that was pretty reasonable, because we felt that there were people who probably aren't registered right now because they can't get a hold of it, because they don't want to grow it on their own for whatever reason. So that was why we set the 1,000. The 1,000 isn't the end, nor is 4 dispensaries the end. When they're operating and they're operating successfully.
Right, you'll do an assessment of what you've done.
And they give a report back to us each year on how they're doing and how many patients they have and how many. Did they get 4? Are they going to have 4 dispensaries to start with, or 2 or 1 or what?
Now, if you want, let's say we have the dispensaries are in motion. You have a first year, at the end of the year or whatever, you have a better assessment of what's going on. Is there any fear of the feds coming to rush in the way they did with California, or is in fact part of your cautious steps are designed to keep the feds at bay? Because as you know, I mean, but the feds are really against these dispensaries. It's not. In fact, they would consider it a violation of federal law. So by virtue of Vermont passing the law, Vermont is currently violating federal law. Would that be? Well,
yeah. We're violating federal law by doing the marijuana for symptom relief bill 6 years ago. That's a violation of federal law.
But 6 years ago we didn't have dispensaries, so it had no teeth. But now you have dispensaries, and the feds must certainly be taking a second look at Vermont.
You know, I don't know that they think that it's any more illegal to have a dispensary than to have. Than to pass a law saying we're just going to ignore the law around patients who are on a registry. You're still violating federal law. And as many people have said in the past, the states are the laboratories for any meaningful change that happens at the federal level. So if we can provide some of that laboratory, that's great. But you're absolutely right. At any point, the feds could come in and say, Vermont, you're in violation, and we're going to shut down all those dispensaries, and we're going to take your list and tear it up, and we're going to prosecute all those 360 or 400 people, and there you have it, you dumb little state. They could do that to us anytime they chose to. I think that by crafting this with really tight controls and restrictions, we've hopefully given them less ammunition or less reason to come after us.
I actually think now, having talked with you, that's a good strategy. Personally, I'm not in favor of prescriptive marijuana itself. I'm a legalization person or alcohol model advocate. Once you do that, of course, everybody benefits. It doesn't matter then whether you're a patient or whether you sit home and watch Vermont public television. Everyone benefits. In fact, I would dread the day when marijuana is 100% prescriptive. I would consider it one of the worst things that could happen to the broad body of marijuana users in this country. And so, you know, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. If it's true that the legislature, in your opinion, will not give us here in Vermont a decrim bill this year, the few provisions that I was thinking of mentioning. I suppose it might be worth even just, talking about what at least was presented to the Speaker and the other committees in and the committees in the House. But for small amounts of marijuana, for people who are 21 years and older, possession of 1 ounce or less would be an assessed civil fine of $150.
Can I interrupt you for
Yes,
1 second?
indeed.
Ohio is not considered a bastion of radicalism, I would say. Would you?
No, not at all. In fact,
Their decrim bill is 4 ounces or less.
That's astonishing.
Yeah.
That's astonishing. I have to look into that because I did not know that.
There are something like 16 states that have decriminalization.
Yes, there's that, and some of them are better bills than others, and more lenient, and under 4 ounces. Do you know if there's an attending fine that goes if you have?
I'm not sure. I just know
I can look into that.
I'm not sure. I just know that when I had my bill in before, we did a lot of research on it, and then for the last couple of years, I haven't focused on that at all. I've only focused on the dispensary bill because I thought that was really important.
And in fact, it's the one that has legs, whereas the decrim bill apparently
Well, it
does
has
not.
legs. It's passed. The governor signed it.
Well, I meant
we now have dispensaries.
Right. The process that you were referring to before is part of that. It's that you've done it. Now you want to see how it develops, and you can look back and do an assessment on that. For people who are 18 to 20 years of age, it's basically the same thing.
This is the proposed bill.
And this is proposed, by the way. This is not what we're getting. In fact, Jeanette has made it clear that she, in her opinion, we are not getting a decriminalization bill in this session. And
I won't say absolutely we're not. I'm saying I think it's highly unlikely.
Okay.
If a bill hasn't had a ton of hearings to this point and hasn't garnered a lot of support in the body, then I think it's highly unlikely that it will happen. And that's true with any bill that's out there that hasn't. If the decriminalization bill doesn't come out of the House, then I don't think we'll do anything.
Okay, so then it would go to the 013 and 14 legislative session.
Right, and you'll have all new legislators. Oh, well, not all new legislators.
You'll have that.
But there will be an election between now and then.
And a new bill would be...
It would have to be introduced again.
Because
at the end of May, or the beginning of May, whenever we go home, any bill that hasn't been passed up to that point is dead.
Is out.
It's just dead. They carry over from the first year of the biennium to the second year, but they don't carry over from session to session.
Okay, now then, if it goes to the next legislative session, it's likely then that they wouldn't pass it necessarily in 013. So we're facing.
Well, they might.
Okay.
I mean, a bill gets introduced in January of 13 for the new session. And it just depends on what kind of support there is for it, whether they're going to take it up and how I mean, we passed, it did take us 2 years to do the dispensary bill because we didn't have the support for it the first year. But that was introduced last January of 11, and it passed during the 11.
Okay, so that means that things can actually happen in the first year of the legislative session.
You hope they do, because you don't want everything to wait until the last couple weeks of the session.
Now, in the two houses, the Senate and the Vermont House, what would you recommend to people in Vermont who, in terms of, is there any one approach over the other for us to kind of get people more interested in this issue and understand the potential harm of illegality of it? For instance, we already know that the Speaker of the House seems to be set against it. But is there any avenue that we could use that would bring some of these issues a little better to his attention? as well as the heads of the Judiciary Committee. It seems one of the clogging points seems to be the Judiciary Committees. But in the Senate now, you're sitting on the Judiciary Committee. Do you know if you will be there in the next session?
I have no idea if I'll be in Montpelier in the next session, since I have to run for election again in November.
What year is it again? Is it this year again?
Yeah.
Oh, you're running? Oh, good.
Everybody runs in Vermont every 2 years.
Including the governor, then.
Including the governor. We all run every 2 years.
You hear that,
Except
Vermont?
for state's attorneys, sheriffs, and that's it, I believe.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who like what you do, and I couldn't imagine them not liking that. Do you have, then in that case, let's jump to that for a moment. Do you have an opponent, do you know, I mean, that you know of now for this?
I have no idea. We declare our intent to run as a candidate in, I think it's the first part of June. Somewhere in the first part of June.
So right now, you and Peter Galbraith are our senators now.
Right.
Do you know if Peter's interested in running again, just off the top of your head? Okay.
We don't talk about it very much. As
Okay.
when it gets to the, I don't mean Peter and I don't talk about it. I mean as legislators, it isn't a
Right.
topic that we talk about very much up there until it gets toward the end of the session.
I see.
When we come back after town meeting, because we're off next week.
Right.
Not this week that we're in right now, but next week. People will begin talking about it because if you're not going to run, you want to make sure you have some people lined up who are interested in running. So we'll begin to talk about it more and more and see who's interested in running. But I have no idea if Peter's going to run again, and then I have no idea who will run either in a primary against us, or as a Republican against us, or as an independent against us, or as a progressive against us.
But you are interested in running again?
I am. I really like the public policy part of it, and I do think I'd like to do it for a couple more years. There's
good.
a couple issues that I want to kind of follow through. Of course, every time you say that, then there's a new issue that comes up during that session that you want to follow through. So I suppose you could be there forever thinking that, but a couple more years anyway.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that you're willing to hang in there, because it's really important, this issue. As you know, we need all the help that we can get, and so Joe just gave us the old 2-minute sign here, and because of the importance of this issue, in fact, in my opinion, it's probably marijuana war in this country is one of the one of the biggest high stakes games, as I call it, running in America today, including Vermont, and because of that. We need to stay with it. As one fellow said in a recent article that I read, I think a couple days ago, I can't think of his name, the genie has been let out of the bag, and it's not going to out of the what little genie jar, and it's not going back in again.
Well, and you know what our real drug problem is right now. The real problem that we have is prescription drugs, the diversion of prescription drugs. That has caused more deaths than than murder and car accidents in Vermont in the last year. That's where all the overdose deaths are. There are few with heroin, but not many. And the heroin usage has actually gone down somewhat because the prescription drug usage is so high. And the gateway to that is, they keep saying marijuana is the gateway to drug usage. The gateway to that is your parents' medicine cabinet.
Exactly.
It is a scary, scary thing.
Most gateways are either in your parents' under the kitchen sink or in their medicine cabinet. Thank you once again for tuning in to Marijuana Resolve. We've just heard from Senator Jeanette White, Democrat Senator in Vermont from Windham County. On behalf of Daryl Pillsbury and myself, we'd like to welcome you back to another show, and we'll see you next month. Thanks again.